There are many gods or godlike beings in Genshin Impact. Teyvat and humans are said to have been creations of the primordial one, and the dragons are beings of the elemental realm. But the gods of Teyvat, however, are another story altogether. Despite the story being halfway through, we aren't really told where the gods actually come from. So based on the lore we currently have, are the gods naturally born or are they actually manufactured? Before we get into that, if you want to see more Genshin Impact content, do consider subscribing to the channel. Let's first establish the many different groups who call themselves gods and their differences. In Teyvat, the term god is rather ambiguous. There are those of Celestia, the Archons, godlike beings such as the Adepti and the Yokai, Elogenes, and above all of them is the primordial one. Suffice to say, many can fall beneath the umbrella term of god. But for the purpose of this video, we are going to just focus on those of Celestia and the Archons, as these two groups are the most commonly known or referred to as gods. Any that competed within the Archon Wars are also largely included within this group, such as Andreas and Decarabian. Of these many gods, there really isn't any one specific criteria of commonality between them. Each of them are vastly different from each other, with the only similarity being most are able to wield and manipulate large amounts of elemental energy. Even the idea of worshippers becomes rather vague, as while the Archons do have dedicated believers, this can't really be said to be the same for Celestia. In addition, many of them rose to the positions of gods in largely different ways. Some just knew they were gods from the moment they manifest into existence, while there are others who started off as mortals and elemental beings and ascended at a later point. As you see though, the distribution of these two groups amongst the gods are rather one-sided. Before we move further into that, let me just clarify that what I mean by born here is those individuals that manifest as gods from the very beginning, while gods that have been made are those that rose to the position or are outright manufactured. So let's first start with gods that seem to have been born naturally. The first example is Zhongli himself. Now, I will preface this by saying that it's a bit difficult to really say he was naturally born, as his lore implies that one day he just came into existence already as a god. There might be a lot that is omitted here, seeing as how he was born more than 6,000 years ago, and it's likely most have just forgotten or might not even know of his true origins. But if we take this at face value, he is implied to have been a god right after manifesting into existence. The gods of Inazuma are also those who largely have no origin story, and while I might want to include them here just purely out of an assumption, again, it's not 100% said that they are naturally born. But as the origins of Zhongli, Makoto, and Raiden A remain largely unknown, I thought to include them under this category anyways. Now, weirdly enough, I couldn't find any other examples of any gods being naturally born, but despite the lack of any evidence for it, it doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. Each of the Archons are functionally elemental beings, and we know that the dragons, who are also largely elemental beings, can manifest themselves into existence even after being killed, such as those from the Seven Sovereigns. So there must exist some gods who fall under this category, and as we are largely unaware of the systems that govern Teyvat, this is a reasonable assumption to make. Another god that is presumably naturally born is the primordial one, since it's not mentioned that he ascended and only came to Teyvat from the outside. But he is largely an outlier and likely to be an exception to the rule. So as you can see, those who fall into this naturally born category are a bit difficult to determine, since most do not remember their origins and we aren't really told of it either. That said, if there aren't that many gods that are born, how about those who are made? While we had little luck with identifying gods that may have been naturally born, as you'll see, there are many examples of gods actually being created. The most recent example is with Scaramouche. With the help of the Doctor, Sumeru Academia was in the process of manufacturing their own god. According to the Doctor, 3 things are required in the creation of a god: a divine vessel, a divine core, and godly knowledge or wisdom. Although that last one was just something the Academia wished to add, as they felt their god should be wise. In any case, while these materials are rather difficult to obtain, the fact that Sumeru Academia was able to procure them and was already in the process of building this new god shows that you can build one from scratch. Of course, we don't know how successful it would have been, but it seems to be indeed possible. Even among the Archons we know so far, there are some who seem to be gods who were created. Firstly is Venti, who wasn't born a god, but rather a wind sprite who gained godhood when the people of Mondstadt placed trust in him during the war with Dekarabian. After winning the Archon War, he was further elevated into an Archon. Secondly are the twin gods of Inazuma, Makoto and A, which I talked about earlier. According to the book, Treasure Tales of the Choken Shin Kageuchi, after the Archon Wars, Raiden A sacrificed herself so that Makoto might rise to the position of Archon. Immediately after this incident, Makoto was said to have recreated A by rebuilding her body and pulling her spirit into it. Again, this shows that gods are able to manufacture other gods, or at the very least, elevate them to a similar standing. Finally, among the Archons, we have Nahida, who, as you all know, was created by Rukkhadevata using a branch of the Irminsul. However, this could just be a requirement of the Irminsul to always have an avatar of itself, which might also explain Rukkhadevata's origins as well. The pattern of elevated or manufactured gods doesn't stop here though. There are also the vision wielders or the Elogenes who are very clearly in the process of ascending and thus considered as created gods. While the Elogenes themselves are not aware of this, we do know examples of people who have ascended, such as Vanessa of Mondstadt and Guhua of Liyue. As you can see, the evidence largely skews in favor of gods being manufactured. A large majority of gods are those who have ascended in one way or another, either through the intervention of other gods or just from how Tevat itself works. Even the Adepti take on disciples who presumably would ascend to the level of Adepti and maybe even gods as well, given they meet the right circumstances. So, is it really a bad thing if most gods are manufactured? Well, the first question that comes to mind is why the system exists in the first place. It seems that even all the way up to Celestia, the creation of gods are something commonplace even among them. While the gods are typically prayed to and act somewhat as protectors for the people, this only really applies to the Archons. This raises a rather interesting question, which is, what exactly are the functions of these gods anyways? We are never really told what their grand purpose even is. It would make sense if the gods are needed to keep Tevat spinning and the system of elevating mortals to gods exists to continuously replace them. But if they have no specified reason for existence, why would the system even exist? What would happen if the gods just disappeared outright? Personally, I think nothing would happen. In The Sun and the Moon, when the Primordial One first came to Tevat, he essentially pushed the elemental beings, the Vishaps, out and created Tevat as we know it today. He then created the humans for an unknown purpose. But there is no mention anywhere that the gods were part of his works as well. Shortly thereafter, the second who came invaded Tevat, and we haven't heard from the Primordial One or his aspects since. It seems to me that this current system isn't one original to Tevat and was introduced at a later stage, making the gods largely not part of the natural order. In addition, when we examine it from the belief system of Gnosticism, the Archons are largely claimed to be the bad guys, which further lends to the idea that the status quo we currently have isn't the right one. This would give some explanations as to why the gods don't seem to be naturally formed beings and would have to be artificially created, as well as having seemingly no purpose in the functioning of Tevat itself. Perhaps their true purpose is to maintain this secondary system, and without them, things would just go back to the original way with only the humans inhabiting Tevat. But this is mostly just a theory, so take it as what it is. I was just surprised to see that most gods seem to have been manufactured, and hopefully we get to see their true purpose and origins in the future. That does it for this video though. If you enjoyed it, do consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. As usual, have a nice day.